It's probably not a surprise to those of you who know me well that I am, well, for all of us in the department, particularly for me, I'm passionate about communicating the importance of political science. And so for those of you that are in the 201 class right now and are sitting in this audience, you've heard it for 10 weeks. And for those of you that took the class already, you've heard it for years. So here it comes again. But in particular, what prompted me, even though it took me a while to pick a topic, was a conversation that I've been having with students and that Dr. Muck and I, Dr. Mark and I have been having about, sort of generally the idea of the importance of political science, why we're maligned so much, and how we can communicate why we are relevant in a time where we are said to not be, but in a time where we should be more relevant than ever. And in particular, what got me even more upset, honestly, about this was an interaction that happened in the past couple of months in a congressional hearing with Representative Tom Massey from Kentucky and, former lots of parts of the American political system, John Kerry. And so I'm going to show the video of the exchange, but in particular, the way in which Massey talks about our discipline and how inappropriate it is, and also how untrue it is.
Secretary Kerry, I want to read part of your statement back to you. Instead of convening a kangaroo court, the president might want to talk with the educated adults he once trusted to fill his top national security positions. It sounds like you're questioning the credentials of the president's advisors currently, but I don't think we should question your credentials today. Isn't it true you have a science degree from Yale? What's that?
Bachelor of Arts degree.
Is it a political science degree?
Yes, political science.
So how do you get a Bachelor of Arts in a science?
Well, it's liberal arts education and degree. It's a bachelor.
Okay, so it's not really science. So I think it's somewhat appropriate that somebody with a pseudoscience degree is here pushing pseudoscience in front of our committee today.
So obviously, there's a lot of things wrong with it. First of which is that the congressman doesn't know the difference between a major and a degree. And the other is that he categorizes political science as a pseudoscience, right? So what most of us probably know, of course, is that a pseudoscience is basically work that does not follow the scientific method. It comes up, the researcher would come up with a theory and then would find whatever evidence he or she needed to confirm the theory, as opposed to doing hypothesis testing and data collection and so forth. And so what the representative is saying, and as he doubles down here on his language over Twitter, when he's getting appropriately criticized for his lack of understanding of all kinds of things, there's an assumption that is made that because a Bachelor of Arts degree can be in a science, then therefore political science is not one, right? So what he says here is he's trying to say that John Kerry admitted he didn't get a science degree, but he goes down here and says it's an academic pursuit, it's not a science, and it's a lousy degree for employment, which, like, I beg to differ because I'm standing here right now. But he also says he's glad to admit that he was glad that Senator Kerry said that it's not a science, and he goes on to say at MIT you can substitute it for an arts or humanities requirement. So as any good scientist or data-driven scholar would do, I went on the MIT website, and I took a look at this, and I give him a giant pants on fire, like PolitiFact would do. You cannot substitute political science for arts or humanities. You have to take a certain amount of credits in social science, arts, and humanities, and so therefore political science is a social science. So what we're getting from an elected official is all kinds of misinformation, all of which to try to say that Senator Kerry is not equipped to have an opinion on pretty much anything that has to do with politics. Because he was a political scientist, not because he was like Secretary of State and a senator and ran for president and all of that kind of stuff. So he goes on to say, in days of Twitter engagement, have you noticed that the scientists who feel most qualified to weigh in on climate science are political scientists? And then he likes his little sassy with Massey hashtag, okay? And the winky face, right? So here he's not only maligning political scientists, but also anyone who thinks climate change is real, right? And that it's a science. And so my first reaction to this was, like, I laughed, and then I was like, yeah, political scientists should be weighing in on climate change. Yes, we should be weighing in on climate science. Not because we know about the actual physical climate, but because we are the scholars who best understand the relationships among and between institutions, behaviors, and policy outcomes. We think about something like climate change, and we know that while, of course, it is scientific, it's also incredibly political, right? So climatologists, and climate scientists understand that type of climate. We understand the political climate, right? We are, as Jennifer Victor, political scientist, tells us, as she calls us to action as responsible political scientists, we are the ones equipped to understand the world and to communicate it appropriately because we are scientists. So yes, we should be the ones that are talking about these things. And I think we deserve a cape. I often tell the students in the research methods class that they earn their lab coat as they finish their project. But I think that we should design a lab coat cape. Because we are armed as superheroes, we are armed with data, right? Our weapon that we choose to use is data. And the way in which we collect it and communicate it, that's the science part of what we do. But what we end up with often is a time where we're in a conversation with someone. It could be that it's an elected official we're listening to. It could be a political pundit. It could be your uncle. And what that person or people say to you is, I don't care what you think, right? And for those of us who went home for the holidays after the 2016 election, I'm sure a lot of us got this, right? You don't know what you're talking about. And so your first inclination might be to say, you suck. Because I do know what I'm talking about. But really what we need to do is say, but wait, I have data. And let me tell you what those data are. And let me communicate it to you in a way that isn't elitist, it isn't ivory tower, but is an appropriate way to communicate that I've done the research, I have the data, I have the evidence, and let me tell you what's going on, right? So you don't want to say you suck, although maybe that's tempting. You want to fall back on the training and say, I have data, and let me show you my lab coat, and maybe I have a cape. Eventually I want to make one of those. So this got me thinking about, whom do we trust when we need information? And so I go to Pew, because I always go to Pew, and I found this about trust, right? So who do we trust as Americans, right? We trust the military, we trust scientists. Like overwhelmingly, and even if you break this down by party, we trust scientists. And in particular, we trust scientists more than the media and elected officials, right? And this becomes important in just a minute. So I'm thinking like, oh my gosh, that's great. They trust scientists. I'm one of those. So like, I could use my data and give my evidence and then, they would believe what I have to say. The problem is we see people like Representative Massey saying that we have a pseudoscience degree and we should not be taken seriously as scientists. So if we're not being listened to, even though we're the ones that are best equipped, right? Best equipped to explain the world, but we are not listened to because we are not trusted scientists, then the question is, how are the media and elected officials educating the public about the relationships between institutions, behaviors, and policy outcomes? Because we know that most people are getting their information about politics from elected officials and the media, which, by the way, are two of the least trusted institutions in America. But that is where we're getting the information. So I thought I would try to find an example, a little bit of a rabbit hole, to try to think of, okay, what would be an issue we could look at recently where the media and elected officials have been hyper-focused, okay? So this takes me to the constitutional crisis we are in right now. We are in a constitutional crisis, right? This is what we are being told to believe, that we are burning it down, right? We're burning it down. And so in particular, the media are reporting about this in ways that are antithetical to the depth and nuance of this actual situation. And there's a study recently, because as we know, this is still unfolding in front of us, right? In fact, just today, the president is backing Don McGahn from not going and testifying and bucking the subpoena. So we're still in the middle of this, right? But in a 4-day period when this first breaks, the media talked about or used the term constitutional crisis 386 times in 4 days. And all of the headlines looked something like this, right? It doesn't really tell you what's going on. It doesn't ask the question of whether we're in one. It just says we are. So if all you're doing is looking on Twitter, you're only looking at headlines, you're presuming because the media are telling you that we are in a constitutional crisis. So not only are the media doing this, but elected officials are also talking about our constitutional crisis, our apparent constitutional crisis.
Mr. Speaker, and still I rise. I rise today, Mr. Speaker, because there are some things that I must call to the attention of the Congress. Some news sources have indicated that somebody has said that we are in a crisis, a constitutional crisis. Mr. Speaker, I am that somebody. We are in a constitutional crisis. Mr. Speaker, we currently have the executive branch and the legislative branch in a standoff. A standoff because the President of the United States of America has refused to cooperate and has encouraged others to do so.
So now we see a Democratic member of the House, Al Green in particular. He's not the first one, but he's the one who calls himself out as being the one who's calling for or saying we're in a constitutional crisis. And he says, yes, we're in one, and it's because the two branches, the congressional branch and the executive branch, are at a standoff. So he is equating a standoff between two branches who are invited to struggle based on the way they're constructed with being in a constitutional crisis. So what he's actually doing is undermining his own argument that we're in one, right? That's the kind of stuff that we understand because we are the ones who are trained for this, right? So then he talks about how the president is engaging in this particular activity. So what Donald Trump does, because this is how he communicates, is he goes on Twitter. And so he can very quickly fire back. So what he says is, the Democrats are saying we're in a constitutional crisis, and we're not in a constitutional crisis because of anything I did. We're actually in a constitutional crisis because of what they have done. They've scammed you all. You gave them the majority in the House, and look what they did, right? You scammed them all, and they will pay. So now it's even more of a false equivalency of what constitutes a constitutional crisis, right? So here's what we're hearing. We're hearing from elected officials, we're hearing from the media, the institutions we go to the most for this information. We are in the middle of a constitutional crisis. But I'm going to the data. That's what we do. So I find some data from Eric Posner, who is actually a law professor at the University of Chicago, and he decided he wanted to look at how often have we been in a constitutional crisis across time. So what he does is he looks at newspaper articles that use the term constitutional crisis, and he tries to calculate across time how many constitutional crises have we been in. And really what he's saying is, does the public think we're in one? Because there may be a time period here that you're looking at and you're thinking, we were in one, but like, no one thought so? Nixon's like, hooray! I'm good! No one thinks that I'm doing anything wrong. Now, of course, we know that investigative journalism basically starts because of Watergate, so we would expect then that there'd be more reporting on it, of course. Now, we think about the time periods here that are shown, and it makes sense why during the impeachment, during the 2000 election, we move along to basically Barack Obama's entire presidency, and then at the beginning of Trump's presidency, that this will lead us to believe we've been in a constant state of a constitutional crisis really since 1999. I think we understand, of course, that that is not the case, but what Posner is trying to show us here is that do we only think there is one when we're told there is one? We understand as political scientists that it's about polarization and gridlock and partisanship and legitimacy. Those are the things that are driving whether or not we think that elected officials are doing things that they're not supposed to be doing. What Tetlock tells us, political scientist Philip Tetlock, what he tells us is here's where there's a big problem with the media. He writes this book about experts who are not political scientists explaining politics. And in particular, this last part's important. He says, this is a problem, and that the media perpetuates bad ideas when, and especially it's bad, when whatever they're talking about is too messy to be wrapped up neatly. Welcome to American politics, right? Too messy to be wrapped up neatly, even if we want it to be. So here's the thing to sort of bring this all together, at least I would say, is what are the consequences of this? What are the consequences of having conversations every day with people engaging with each other on social media, on these virtual worlds, where you're having conversations that doesn't bring the nuance and the evidence required to really understand what's going on? Well, part of what happens is that we lose trust. We lose trust in the government. So Edelman, this is a firm, and they do this large-scale worldwide study on trust. And what they find is that between 2017 and 2018, if you look particularly in the informed public, that there was a 23-point decrease in trust. And in particular, you might notice that government across both informed and general population takes the biggest dive. We don't trust the government because what we hear about the government isn't coming from people who are giving us the full picture of what's really going on. So I did a little research again because I wanted to know who's considered part of the informed public, because you would think the more informed they are, the more they'd understand the nuance. Well, one of the most important indicators of an informed public is significant media consumption. this is bad. From where are they getting the media? From whom are they listening, right? You are an informed public, but you're being informed by people who aren't giving you the information you need to really understand what is in front of you, okay? Finally, what I would argue when we think about this is that it's not that the Constitution's on fire. It's in fact, we have preserved it. Right now, in a period where people think we're in a constitutional crisis, I have more trust than ever that our institutions are doing exactly what Madison designed them for, right? To confront one another, to balance one another, right? That political actors are contesting constitutional powers using the Constitution. The Constitution is the mechanism by which these confrontations are occurring. And what Matt Glassman tells us, political scientists, is that this is the essence of the design of the Constitution. What's happening right now is a political crisis. We are not in a constitutional crisis. We're watching the Constitution flourish and work. And in fact, if Congress wasn't engaging in oversight, then I would be having a conversation about a constitutional crisis, because they're not doing what they are supposed to be doing. So as we think about when we're faced with someone like Thomas Massie, and he gets schooled by me on Twitter, could not resist, okay? Couldn't resist. When Nate Silver, who's been a proponent of political science, when he maligns us after the 2016 election because we just failed to predict Donald Trump as the winner, when we're being told as academics we are brainwashing and indoctrinating all of you to be liberal, communist, fill in the blanks, right? When we are constantly told that we are not doing what we're supposed to be doing and we don't know anything and we don't know any better, I urge you to think about, and particularly for my seniors out here who are leaving us, how good it feels to drop those knowledge bombs. When you just like drop it and say, I know exactly what I'm talking about. And you have to remember from where you got it. You got it from political science. Thank you.